Okay, so you know how like a really good story can just pull you in, right?
hmm
But like what happens when that story, like it's built on lies?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's actually something we're going to dive into today with this speech.
Yeah.
It's called The Power of a Lie and the Power of the Truth.
Cool.
And it's delivered by Minister Louis Farrakhan.
Hmm.
And we're going to be like really unpacking his arguments about truth and lies and how he connects those ideas to like big social dynamics, like power structures and stuff.
And how those things play out in the real world.
Exactly.
Okay.
Like,
So we're not talking about like, just like a boring, philosophical debate here.
right.
Like Farrakhan uses this really cool metaphor
Okay.
of truth as like this bright light
Uh-huh.
and falsehood as darkness. And he actually asks people to imagine like a totally dark room you're sitting in there, and then suddenly, bam, the lights get flipped on,
Yeah.
and the darkness is just gone like that.
And it's instant, right?
Instantly.
Like it never even existed. It's powerful imagery.
It really is.
And it makes you think about how fragile lies can be,
Right.
when they're exposed to the truth.
Yeah, because like we all know that like lies can stick around for a really long time,
Oh,
They
absolutely.
can take root in your mind, like they can really influence how you see the world.
They become like part of your reality almost.
Totally.
And that's what makes them so dangerous.
So how does Farrakhan explain like why lies have this power to like linger, even when like deep down we might suspect the truth? Like how do they hang on so strong?
Well, he says that living in a world that's like flooded with falsehoods,
Yeah.
it's like being deprived of oxygen.
Oh, wow.
It's like being slowly lulled to sleep or into this state of unconsciousness where you can't think clearly anymore.
It's like you're being suffocated by lies,
It's
and you don't
actually
even realize it's happening.
right. And he connects this to the idea of like sleeping giants,
Okay.
which is this really powerful image
Yeah.
of people who have like all this potential strength, but they're unaware of it.
Because they're asleep.
Yeah, because they've been lulled into the state of unconsciousness.
Quiet lies.
Exactly. And this image of sleeping giants, it's especially powerful when you think about like the historical context of Black people in America.
Absolutely.
It speaks to this idea of untapped potential and the forces that have kept people down.
Yeah, and he takes it even further than that.
Okay, how so?
So Farrakhan argues that just like our bodies need the right kind of food to be healthy,
Right.
our minds can be harmed if we're constantly taking in falsehoods.
He's talking about mental nourishment
Exactly.
like that.
Yeah, and he even uses this analogy of woodworking. You know how like if you try to plane a piece of wood against the grain, it'll just splinter and get messed up?
But it won't smooth out the way you want it to.
Exactly.
And
It's
yeah.
like he's suggesting that there's a right way and a wrong way to think.
Like there's a natural grain to our thinking.
Yeah, and that lies can actually like warp our brains.
Like damage the grain.
Yeah.
Huh. It's a really interesting way to put it.
Right.
He's blending morality and almost like scientific language.
Yeah.
It's like he's saying there are like real, tangible consequences to what we allow into our minds.
Like lies aren't just these harmless little white lies,
Right? They have the power to shape us,
Exactly.
mold us in ways we might not even realize.
So we've been talking about how lies can like mess with our minds, but how does Farrakhan explain why lies are so unbelting in the first place?
That's a great question.
Like, why do we fall for them?
Well, he uses this really interesting analogy. He compares it to a magic show.
Okay.
Like, we all know it's an illusion, right?
Right.
But there's still that part of us that wants to be tricked, wants to believe in the impossible.
Oh, totally. Like, even when you know it's not real, there's that little part of you that's like, maybe, just maybe.
Exactly. It's captivating. And Farrakhan says that's exactly how falsehoods hook us. They offer this like seductive illusion, this escape from reality that can be so hard to resist.
Even when we like deep down suspect the truth.
Yeah. And this is where he brings in this idea of Satan.
Okay.
He says that just as God's world is built on truth, Satan being the opposite,
The ultimate bad guy.
right? He constructs his world on falsehoods, on deception.
So it's all about creating this like facade, this distraction from the real deal.
Exactly. It's all smoke and mirrors.
And that real deal being truth.
Exactly. He's saying that lies are ultimately empty.
They can create anything real.
It's like building a house on sand,
Or like one of those super elaborate houses of cards.
Yes. Perfect example.
Yeah.
It might look impressive for a while, but it's so unstable.
One wrong move
The
and...
whole thing collapses.
Exactly. And Farrakhan says that's what always happens with anything built on lies. It might last for a bit, but eventually.
The truth comes crashing down.
And when that happens, when the lies are
It
exposed,
can be brutal.
devastating.
Totally. He talks about how truth has this, like, inherent power to just shatter illusions.
No matter how carefully they've been constructed.
It's like a wrecking ball.
So how does he illustrate this point?
Well, he tells this really powerful story about a man who discovers that his best friend has been cheating on him.
Oh, wow. That's rough.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking.
And it really drives home that point about how lies can just rip apart even the strongest bonds.
Absolutely. It's not just about abstract concepts here. This is about real people
Yeah.
and the very real pain that lies can inflict.
And this struggle between truth and
It's
lies
not just a one-time thing.
Right.
Farrakhan says it's something we grapple with constantly.
throughout our lives.
And he argues that building strong moral character
That's essential.
for navigating this battle.
It's like he's saying, if you want to fight for truth in the world, you got to start with yourself.
Exactly. You got to be willing to choose truth, even when it's hard.
Even when it's tempting to just look the other way.
And he talks about how character is built in those moments.
When we resist temptation.
Exactly. Whether it's the allure of easy money through gambling, the escape of drugs, or the betrayal of infidelity.
Yeah, those moments where you're like, I know I shouldn't, but...
And he even shares stories from his own life,
Oh, really?
where he chose honesty even when it meant sacrificing something.
Like what?
Like that story about when he was a kid and he found his friend's pearl-handled knife.
Right.
He could have kept it,
Easily.
but he didn't. He gave it back.
Because he knew it was the right thing to do.
And that feeling of guilt of knowing he violated something important,
It stuck with him.
it shaped him.
Yeah.
It's like those choices we make, even the seemingly small ones,
Right. They add up.
they shape who we are.
Wow.
They build our moral compass.
And for Farrakhan, that strong moral compass that's crucial for confronting what he sees as the systemic lies that are just woven into the fabric of society, the lies that allow injustice to persist.
Exactly. And this brings us to, I think, maybe the most sensitive and controversial part of his speech.
Okay?
His claims about who exactly perpetuates these systems of power.
Because he doesn't just talk about this in a vague sense.
No, he gets very specific.
And he makes some serious accusations.
Particularly about Jewish people.
And it's important to acknowledge
Yeah.
that these claims have been widely condemned as
I mean,
anti-Semitic and dangerous.
And it's crucial to be clear that we are not endorsing or condoning those views in any way.
Absolutely not.
But what we can analyze
Right?
is how he uses this idea of a hidden enemy to try to explain the suffering and oppression of Black people throughout history.
It's like this classic conspiracy theory trope.
Right, this idea that there's this shadowy group working behind the scenes,
Pulling the strings.
controlling
You
everything.
notice how this accusation of a hidden enemy,
It ties directly back to his core message about truth versus lies.
it's all connected
He's essentially saying that this group is using deception and manipulation.
to maintain their power.
It's a powerful rhetorical strategy
Oh, absolutely.
because it taps into people's fear,
They're distrust.
especially when they're feeling powerless or marginalized.
Yeah, when you're feeling like the world is against you, it can be easy to latch onto these ideas,
Right.
but it's also incredibly dangerous.
Because it can be used to justify prejudice and discrimination.
Which is never okay.
Oh,
It's like he's drawing these lines, you know?
Yeah, like you're either with us or against us.
Exactly. And that kind of thinking, it can be really dangerous.
It can definitely be used to shut down dialogue and demonize anyone who disagrees.
Exactly, which is like the opposite of what we should be striving for.
Right, but even putting aside those really problematic claims for a minute, it is interesting how he uses this idea of a shared enemy to call for Black unity. You know,
You're okay,
he
yeah.
urges people to put aside their differences, whether it's religious or political, and come together as one against this perceived threat.
It's a powerful message, for sure.
It taps into that deep desire for strength and solidarity.
Especially in the face of adversity.
Exactly. But again, you have to ask yourself, like, at what cost?
Right, because is that kind of unity really meaningful if it's built on a foundation of fear and suspicion?
That's the question, isn't it?
It's something to think about, for sure.
Definitely. But let's maybe shift gears a bit and talk about Farrakhan's call to action. Because it's not all doom and gloom. You know, he doesn't just leave his listeners with this sense of despair.
Okay.
He challenges them to embrace truth in their own lives, like making an active part of everything you do.
So it's not just about like recognizing truth when you see it
No, it's about actively choosing it.
in your everyday actions.
Exactly. Like he uses this really simple example of honestly responding to a letter,
Okay.
even if it means disappointing the person who sent it.
Interesting.
It's a small act, but he uses it to illustrate this bigger point about living with integrity,
Even when it's hard.
even when it would be easier to just tell a little white lie.
So it's about building a life
And a community.
on this foundation of honesty and trust.
Exactly. And he talks about the importance of keeping your word, honoring your commitments, even when no one's watching.
Like you're not doing it for the praise or the recognition.
Right, it's about something deeper.
It's interesting, though, because he also uses this example of, like, gang members
Oh, right.
demanding integrity from within their ranks.
Yeah, like even in that world where violence and distrust are everywhere, there's still this understanding that truth matters.
Because when you're putting your life on the line, you need to be able to trust the people around you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Trust becomes paramount.
It makes you think about how these ideas of truth and integrity, they can emerge in the most unexpected places.
And how they're often tied to these very real, very human needs for safety and belonging.
And it's interesting how this all circles back to his point about character, right?
Yeah, it's like he's saying the truth-telling, it's not just some abstract ideal.
Right. It's about who we are as people.
It's about the choices we make every single day, the way we show up in the world.
And it makes you wonder, like, what impact do those small acts of honesty have?
The ones we might not even think about.
Yeah, like choosing not to gossip about a coworker or being upfront with a friend, even when it's uncomfortable.
It's about shifting the focus from these grand gestures to those everyday interactions.
Those little moments where we have the opportunity to choose truth over convenience or self-interest.
Exactly.
Mhm.
And I think that's a really powerful takeaway from this speech.
Yeah.
Because Farrakhan might be this incredibly controversial figure, but at the heart of his message is this call to recognize the power of truth
In our own lives.
and in the world around us.
And he leaves us with this really striking image. How he brings everyone back to that moment when the lights were off in the room.
Yes. And then suddenly, bam, the light comes on.
And it's like he's saying that even when it feels like falsehood and deception have taken over, truth always has the power to illuminate, to cut through all the darkness.
It's a powerful image.
It really is. It makes you
Yeah.
think, like when a lie is finally exposed, what happens to it? Does it just disappear like that darkness when the light comes on?
Or does it leave a mark?
Yeah, like a stain that lingers even after the truth has been revealed.
That's a really interesting question.
Oh, yeah.
And it's something I think we all grapple with.
Because we've all been touched by lies in some way.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And we've all probably told a few ourselves.
So yeah, what is the legacy of a lie, even after it's been exposed?
And what responsibility do we have to choose truth in our own lives?
And to challenge falsehoods wherever we find them.
It's a lot to unpack.
It really is. There are no easy answers.
That's for sure. But that's what makes these deep dives so interesting, right?
Exactly.
It's about grappling with these complex ideas
Exploring different perspectives
and hopefully coming away with a little bit more understanding.
about ourselves and the world around us.
So until next time, keep asking those tough questions.
And keep searching for the truth wherever it might lead you.